Electronisounds Audio, the YouTube channel for you.
Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Dean from Electronisounds. Stick around. Today, it's going to be a really casual video today. Today, we're just a couple of synth nerds hanging out together. I've made a whole bunch of beats inside of the Elektron Digitakt, and we're going to check those out today, as well as going over some basic sampling tips as well. Here we go. We're going to be checking out this Quasimidi Raven from 1996. I've been sampling all sorts of sounds from this out into the Elektron Digitakt, and I've got lots of different grooves that I'm going to show you. Let's check out what this old beauty sounds like. Come on, let's get into this. If you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, you're probably already aware of my passion for these products from Quasimidi. This one is the Raven, and I just picked this up off of a lowball eBay auction. You might be familiar with the Quasimidi Sirius, which I've got a couple videos for. I'm going to put a link to those up in the corner here. And you might be familiar with the Quasimidi Revolution 309, which I also did some videos for. I'll put a link to one of those videos up here in the corner as well. I just picked this guy up off of a lowball eBay auction. I wasn't actually expecting to win the auction. It was just kind of a lowball bid, but lo and behold, I lucked out and actually won the item. So it's got some issues here. It's a little bit of a chipped key, and you may be able to see that there's actually no plastic case covering the display here. So it looks as though you might be able to get dust down in there, but it's actually kind of a sealed unit on the inside. Doesn't really appear to be that big of a deal other than a cosmetic issue. One of these knobs kind of doesn't respond that well, so it's a little bit difficult to adjust the actual tempo at this time. And a couple of these buttons you have to press really hard to get it to respond. But other than that, it definitely makes sound, and I've definitely been recording a lot of stuff out of this. Just like some of the other Quasimidi products that I've shown you, this is actually more of a groovebox and a sequencer and a songwriting tool than just a synthesizer. It's got multiple tracks inside of it, and it's actually a 16-part polyphonic. Multi-timbral, not polyphonic, 16-part multi-timbral, excuse me. So you've got a kick drum track, a snare drum track, you've got a hi-hat track, a percussion track, a bass track, 2 sequencer tracks, and a chord track as well. So I've been sampling drum sounds out of this, bass sounds, and pad sounds, and chord samples, all into the Elektron Digitakt. And that's what we're going to be checking out today, guys, is I'm going to be playing back for you all sorts of different grooves that I've created. These grooves are going to be created in the Digitakt using only the sounds that I sampled out of this vintage Quasimidi Raven. I want to let you know right off the jump that this video is not going to be about me sitting and playing sounds out of the Raven. I'm literally just going to be playing back grooves that I made inside of the Elektron Digitakt with nothing but sounds that I sampled out of the Quasimidi Raven. So why would I do something like this? Why would I spend a bunch of time sampling an old piece of gear into a newer sampler groovebox like the Elektron Digitakt? I'm glad you asked. I actually have a little bit of a list here of some of the important things that might come out of a little project like this. The first one is obvious to me. It's being creative for the sake of being creative, just to keep pushing that creative boundary. The second thing is that using a set of different tools is unquestionably going to bring me a different set of sonic results. If I'm just sitting and I'm using Ableton again and again and I'm using the same plugins, I'm likely to get the exact same sounding musical results. And if I want to stretch out and maybe get something a little bit different, or maybe get a sound that has a little bit more of a life and a character and like an analog actual sound to it, then maybe I don't want to spend all of my time inside Ableton, and I maybe want to experiment a little bit more to see what sort of sonic results I can get. Another thing is that there's a lot of limitations in something like this. Creating grooves inside of the Digitakt, I mean, there's not EQ per channel. You have one filter per channel. So you can't really do a whole lot of frequency sculpting inside of a box like this. And using these sort of limitations by just taking samples, mostly one-shots, into something like the Digitakt and then working with them in this limited environment here. Again, those limitations breed creativity, and they're going to get me working with the samples in a different way than I would, say, if I loaded them just directly into Ableton, where I can literally warp them and do all sorts of stuff that I can't do in the Digitakt. Another thing is that if you build a whole bunch of grooves and examples using the exact same small set of tools, those are really going to start taking on a consistent sound and a consistent life of their own. And what you can do is you can maybe, create 10, 12, 20 different grooves and then pick your favorite 3 grooves out of there, the ones that really stick to the top and really stand out as something special. Maybe you can turn those tracks into an EP using other sounds than just, what you started with. But what you're going to end up with in that EP is you're going to end up with a consistent sound. You're going to end up with a thread that ties all 3 of those tracks on that EP together, that you base them on the same type of a setup. Plus, being as if you create a bunch of grooves and then just pick the top 3 to make into an EP, you're really taking your best work and then you're taking those items, those pieces to the next level. Another thing is that this is a really great way to just get to know a new piece of gear in your studio. I just got the Raven in, and as I was sitting and playing with it and seeing what sort of sounds come out of it, I would take my favorite of those sounds and sample them into the Digitakt to work with. So it's just really a fun and interesting way to get to know a new piece of gear in your studio as well. So just start sampling your favorite sounds right out of it into another piece of gear and then experimenting with what you can create using just those samples alone. This video is all about pushing your creativity to the next level in the studio. Sometimes it's easy to feel like maybe you've lost your music mojo in the studio. And I want to take this opportunity to share a list with you guys that I put together for keeping your music mojo alive in the studio. You can find it at deansmojo.com. The stand that I'm using today to hold the Digitakt is the Colibri stand from Crema Cafe. I really like these stands because they're super lightweight and you can fold them up, put them up in your backpack or whatnot. I did a sample pack for the kind folks over at Crema Cafe as well. It's called Velvet Carbon Techno. If you're into the super techno sound, be sure and check that one out as well. Something else that's cool and beneficial about taking all the time to create these little beats inside of the Digitakt is that now the next time I'm looking to, say, create a live jam or whatnot, I've got a set of starter projects that I can just, call up, go through, pick one, and maybe start adding to it. And I can create a live jam in a whole lot less time than I would if I was having to start from scratch. been enjoying my content and maybe you've thought about becoming a patron, now is a really great time to get on board. All of my patrons get all of these samples for free, as well as hundreds of other free samples. One of the techniques that I used while sampling chords from the Raven is I sampled a little bit higher in pitch than I would typically need. So here's the chord stab here. It's like an F minor 7 chord. One of the things that I like to do is just drown these in reverb. So if I max out the reverb, you can hear that we're already bringing some life to this chord. And if I go over to the source page here and I detune these, that's the reason that I might sample these at a bit higher pitch than I might need. Not only is the sample going to be a little bit shorter and take up a little bit less sampling time inside of your unit, but also now when you down pitch the sample, you can get these really delicious, juicy chord sounds. Check out this one, guys. Listen to how deep and glassy that is. And you can just keep pitching these around. I really like what adding all that reverb does and doing the repitching here to get different tones. The Digitakt is really great for doing just that. Something else I've always found a little bit interesting about using these older pieces of gear is that this is actually a groovebox and it's got a drum machine inside it and it's got a few drum kits that literally take up all of the keys. There'll be a sound on each key. So you might think, wow, that's a lot of drum sounds. There's hundreds of drum sounds in here. I've got all these drum kits. But what you find is when you actually start going into it to make patterns is that the kick drum will be here, the snare drum will be here, there'll be some hi-hats here. But that's pretty much it on that drum kit as far as the kick drum. You're going to get lots of weird percussion sounds and whistles and unusable sounds and quijadas and tambourines and congas and bongos and stuff hiding out up here. But if you don't like that actual kick drum that's happening down here, you're pretty much just SOL as far as that kit is concerned. There's not a whole lot of options for kits inside of the Raven. And so what I did was I wasn't really finding some kick drums that are, really beefy and punching through and giving me the result that I wanted. So I started doing some layering inside of the Digitakt, where I was layering and combining some different kick drums together and then resampling those in the Digitakt using the resample function to try to get different and more beefy sounding kick drums. So one of the things that I thought was really neat is when I found this tom sample, which surprisingly has quite a bit of low end into it. And this is what it sounds like when I sample it clean out of the Raven. And it's a little, high pitched, but I realized that if I detune this, it actually becomes a monster kick drum for like dub techno. Listen to how deep this thing goes. You're hearing the little click of me hitting the Digitakt as well here. Super, super awesome. The Digitakt, I don't know about its algorithm, but something about when you use this tuner and you repitch samples inside of the Digitakt, sometimes they just sound absolutely magic. And I was really, really stoked to be able to use the tom as a kick drum like this after not really finding such a deep kick drum inside of the Raven by default.